Shut up and sit down.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Watches Etc. As we've said in the past, we love chronograph watches. But in truth, very few of us actually need a chronograph these days. And even with one on my wrist, I usually still reach for the iPhone when I need to time something. But there is a certain romance and idealism about having a chronograph attached to my wrist. But when it comes to chronos, I have a pretty narrow set of watches that really turn me on. There is of course the Speedmaster Pro, which is an icon, the Tag Autavia, which I also love, and the Daytona, which despite being hard to get, is still a bit of a grail. And then perhaps my favourite chrono of all, the Zenith El Primero. I should perhaps also give a shout out to the Bulliver Moonwatch, which whilst not being quite up to the class of my other faves, is still a great piece with tons of history. But one watch that is often overlooked is this, the IWC Pilot Spitfire Chronograph. It's quite odd really, because IWC have a great history of chronographs, but I never paid that much attention to this line. But my interest was piqued again in 2018, when IWC showed their revamped Spitfire Pilots range, which usefully coincided with their sponsorship of a 1943 World War II Spitfire. The Spitfire range comprises of a variety of models, including time-only pieces, a perpetual calendar, and chronographs. But today we're going to focus on the chrono. So, what do we have? Well, it's a watch with a 41mm case, screw-down crown and pushers, a black dial and a couple of sub-dials. Protecting the dial is a convex sapphire glass with anti-reflective coatings on both sides. Under the hood, the Pilot chronograph with the reference IW3878-04 has the caliber 69380, which is part of the 69000 family. This is a relatively new movement, introduced in 2016 within the INGI, and IWC has always seemed to rely on an ETA Valjoux 7750 movement to power previous chrono efforts. The Valjoux always did a great job, but I guess it is 2020 and it's probably a bit uncool and a bit too much of a workhorse and somewhat common and dated now, so I suppose an integrated column wheel in-house caliber was somewhat overdue for a manufacturer the size of IWC. The caliber 69380 is a 4Hz movement, beating at 28,800 beats per hour, with a power reserve of 46 hours, all smoothed along via 33 joules. The rotor is bidirectional, so winding is more efficient, and as usual on these Pilot watches, the case back is solid in order to provide complete anti-magnetic protection. The case back itself is dominated by an engraved image of a Spitfire. Finally, it's water resistant to 6 bar, i.e. 60 meters. I love how these watches represent to me what I think a typical chronograph should be like. They are visually attractive yet understated, and the overall style and proportions hit the sweet spot. The mechanical functionality is very good, and information is presented with simple clarity. I also personally like a date complication, and the strap options, whether this steel bracelet or the leather ornato options, finish the package well, although as often with IWC, the leather option could perhaps be a little bit thinner and a bit more supple. This Spitfire chronograph will sing to many people, as it is a pretty straightforward watch, but with a presence that is thoughtful. It's also a watch that indicates that the wearer knows something about watches. It's stylish, casual, detailed, and from the nearly invisible crystal to the fine dial finishing and the snappy action of the chronograph pushers, the whole package feels cohesive and very like IWC. On the wrist, the Spitfire impresses, wearing perfectly. I like how it is simply a much more balanced offering than the larger sizing which we often see on chronograph watches. It's big enough to feel sporty, but not large enough to overpower, and the design feels loosely military inspired, but not in a way that makes me feel like I'm wearing anything purchased from an army surplus or fancy dress shop. As I've said in previous reviews, style is hard to pin down with watches, but with this piece, IWC has created something that feels both stylish and considered, but never fussy. I think it's also cracking value, with IWC demonstrating that you can still get a watch with a lot of personality from a great brand for around $5,000. And you can do all of this without waitlists or resorting to the grey market. Rolex, take note. So guys, what do you think about the IWC Spitfire? Or even IWC in general? We would love to hear from you in the comment section below. Please also do like and subscribe to the channel, that would really help and be appreciated. Well, that's about all for today, so all that's left to say is thanks for watching, keep smiling, and see you again soon for another episode of Watches Etc.